to yours. Welcome to EMS at Sea Level. I am circling back with some of the guests we talked to last year, and today we're with Carl Hung, CEO and President of Seasoned Group. Carl, great to see you again. Last year we were, I guess we were a bit gloomy, but we were pushing on and helping customers in the best way we could as we went through the crisis. Now we're seeing some strange disruptions that are almost a byproduct of the recovery. Talk to me a little bit about how you see the recovery at the moment and what it's doing in terms of challenging the supply chain right now.
Yeah, so the recovery's certainly gone strong. I think from our standpoint, we've never experienced a higher book-bill ratio, which is a key metric that we keep track of. Mm-hmm. We're at a rate of around 1.82 right now for book-bill.
Wow.
So it's a very healthy level right now. A lot of it is driven by the fact that the lead times have gone out extraordinarily. So we've asked our customers to place orders with us earlier on so as we can secure the supply. But B, as well, too, we're just seeing a massive uptick in demand. I think there's a lot of pent-up frustration / demand.
Yeah.
Because of COVID last year, that people wanted to spend money, couldn't spend money. And now they're just out there and buying all the capital equipment that they need. So we're seeing the benefit of that.
Yeah. And Carl, when you talk about the great book-to-bill ratio, is that a book-to-bill ratio that's great because the bill numbers were lower than they would have been 12 months ago because of COVID? So where are we in terms of recovery against the kind of pre-COVID period? Are we up on pre-COVID?
We're up on pre-COVID. We're back to 2018, 2019 levels. So the book-bill ratio is not because of the low billing. It's we're seeing good billing and even better bookings.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. And when you look at the obviously demand side holding up incredibly well and actually improving all the time, but some real issues on the supply chain side. We've been reading in the media about component problems and car lines actually being stopped because of component, particularly semiconductor shortages. What kind of supply chain challenges are you having right now?
I think it across the board would be the proper term. Mind the pun there. But over there, the electronic component wise, ICs, that's the biggest topic that everyone's talking about. But actually, you can always buy it on the spot market. If you can find the supply, you'll get it for the right price. We're seeing issues more on stuff you can't buy on spot market, more on the customized parts, PCBs. Plastic parts, even metal, all these sort of products, they are seeing much longer lead time now.
Yeah.
And also massive increase in prices.
Yeah. And when you look at those issues on the supply chain, what do you put those down to? Obviously, there are some suppliers that have just disappeared because they didn't make it through the crisis. There are suppliers, I guess, like PCB guys that are dependent on something further down the supply chain, like laminate. But where are those problems coming from?
A lot of it has to do with the chase for raw materials. That's a big issue right now, where you can look at the pricing of all sorts of commodities, from gas to copper to iron to steel. All that's been up considerably.
Yeah.
A lot of because I think from a speculation standpoint, it's a great market to be investing into. With people's excess cash wise, they can all be buying into the commodities market and make money there. But aside from that, the supply of components and parts, I don't think has decreased much. It's just there's been more restrictions in terms of where it's flowing.
Yeah.
So for example, with ICs in particular, there's a lot of restrictions on the Chinese OEMs buying a lot of the ICs, and so they have to find other means to buy such circuits, and they end up buying more than they actually need, maybe a couple of years worth, perhaps. So a much bigger shortage on these components than is actually real demand for.
Yeah. And Carl, when you look at it from a point of view of mitigating some of those problems. There are a few things that you can do. You mentioned buying components on the spot market, but when you buy on the spot market, I guess you've got to do a little bit more in terms of verification and a little bit more in terms of making sure that the components get to the line are
Yes.
the correct components. There's no fake components in there. There's no tampered components. There's no recycled components. Are you putting more measures in place as you have to approach those less traditional channels?
Well, certainly, I think from our standpoint, we've been very strict in whom we deal with. So we actually haven't expanded our supply base during this period. We've just put more pressure on our existing suppliers, asking them to do a more stringent job testing. But one of our mutual friends, whom I appeared on the show last time, he's experiencing great business right now because everyone is sending components to him for testing. Just because it's the perfect opportunity for these fraudsters to be making a quick buck on.
Yeah, so they're being opportunists. And then there's the second thing that you've talked about in terms of mitigating these risks is when you do have something that's suddenly gone out to a 20-week lead time, think about redesign. Think about redesign. And you have a great design team within your organization. You're kind of a full stack EMS that can do that. How important has that been to your customers?
Well, I'll give you an example where, as everyone knows, there's a big shortage on ICs for a lot of electric vehicles. But right now, actually, batteries, everyone's fighting for batteries as well. 90% of all battery production is done in China. I think 70% of it goes to Chinese electric vehicle makers, where the pricing of EVs have gone to a ridiculous level. I saw the latest one, I think is selling for around $5,000 for an electric vehicle in China, where the license plate is actually worth 4 times more than the car itself in Shanghai. So it's a very unique situation. Everyone's driving towards EV, and so batteries are being bought up. We've got some of our customers coming to us saying, our battery vendor has just told us their entire year's worth of capacity has been bought up by one producer, by one customer. And so we've actually helped them change to a different battery supplier. Same thing happened to the second battery supplier too. So now we're on to our third battery supplier with different dimensions now, which each time requires a spin on the board. So we need to be able to do it quickly as well, because when it comes to battery, that's a very critical component where you can talk about explosion and fireproof. So if you don't redesign the board properly and do the proper testing, that's a major concern. So those are some of our strengths where we focus in on the battery design itself and helping them optimize the boards to manage the battery properly.
Yeah, and I think it's important to encourage customers to think outside of the box and think that, maybe it's not just about trying to find a component on the gray market or trying to force those components when they're not available. Is redesign part of an option? And then I think we get to this idea of, we've had disruption this year with shortage of components. Last year we had the pandemic playing a huge role. The year before that, we had trade wars and tariffs playing a huge role. We're now in a position where design's got a role to play in planning for disruption. And this whole idea of design for disruption, I think is really interesting for an EMS like yourself that has got huge manufacturing experience combined with design experience. Talk to me a little bit about how you see that working and how you see that being perhaps key in your future OEM relationships.
Well, I think in the past, a lot of our EMS pals would be pushing the added value engineering perspective of how to drive cost out of the supply chain. But as you mentioned right now, it's about continuity of supply more than just pricing itself. And during this period, it's helping customers do exactly that, finding multiple sources for them and making our design robust enough to be able to pivot between different components on a whim, because a lot of the current situation is that they're not giving you an EOL warning. They're not giving you a warning at all, actually. They're just telling you your lead time is all of a sudden from 24 weeks to 52 weeks.
Yeah.
That's happened before, or they'll tell you your pricing have just increased by 6 times on your existing purchase orders. Not new purchase orders, but existing purchase orders.
Yeah, you try doing that with your customers, Carl.
Believe me, they won't go for it. We may have tried, but yeah, no, it's difficult for sure. And so from our standpoint, we can't accept that. For the component supplier, they're telling us either you accept these price increase or just push out the orders or cancel the orders, because they simply have too much demand and not enough supply. So from our end, we need to remain robust and help the customers with multiple options. You can't go to a customer and say to them, sorry, Mr. Customer, what now? I don't have a part. You have to go to them with the solution in hand, saying, this part's out, but I've got this one that we can.
Yeah, and we can respin the board, and we can do that quickly, and we have all those options. Yeah, and I see that. I see that as a huge value add and a key part of the partnership.
It is a key part, but still, it's at the situation where that's not the end all be all. I think you're talking the 52-week component lead time. You find an alternative for it. It might be a 16-week lead time, but it's still a 16-week lead time. So from that standpoint, do you take the leap of faith saying, okay, Season Group, can you go ahead and start designing it? But I'm going to place a PO using for these components, just expecting you to be finishing your design in 2 months to 3 months, and you're buying the component ahead of time before it's finalized, and having confidence that it's going to work. Where from our standpoint, with our years experience in design, we know the components that we select, it's most likely going to work, and it's not going to be a sunk cost later on. Yeah. But you have to work with a design company that also has the manufacturing capability, that has the outlook of the entire supply chain itself. You can't work with just a pure design house along with separate from the EMS. It's a combined solution.
Yeah, no, I agree, Carl. I think we've moved from a point of view where we're just thinking about design for manufacturer. We have to think about design for supply chain, and we have to think about design for disruption, because there'll be another disruption that comes after this one, and we've no idea how to plan for that, because we don't know what it's going to be. So we just need to be adaptable and agile. When you look at the last year, I mean, it's got to be one of the most fascinating years in your career as a business owner, as a manager within the EMS industry, and just, from a work point of view all around. What do you think are some of the key lessons you've learned over that time and that you'll take through the recovery? What have you kind of had to change, but you've felt have been actually real improvements in the business?
Well, from the major difference this year, what guided us through definitely was the team. From a team's perspective, I don't think we've ever been as aligned as we have been. I think the pandemic itself has aligned us all, and we're all thinking in the same manner. So it's helped us in that manner. And starting from the top all the way down to the bottom, driving improvements throughout the company that way. Because it's a sense of urgency. You've got that survival instinct in place that helps push the company forward. I think for us, as a 46-year-old company, we've never really had a sense of urgency as we had last year. Because as we've always grown, we've always been profitable. We've dealt with previous epidemics, not pandemic, before, and survived properly. This was the biggest challenge we've ever faced. But through it, it's bonded us and made us change considerably. With COVID and with this recovery as well too, one of the biggest things that we're seeing has been the uptake in the Chinese market, for example. Right now, I spent the last 2 months in China itself. Prior to that, I had not been up for 14 months. And during those 14 months, China has exploded completely. Where I've got, looking from a real estate standpoint, one of my colleagues bought an apartment nearby, 40 minutes away from our factory. She paid 1.5 million renminbi for it, the same apartment 8 years ago. Her nephew bought the same one 8 years ago too. Sold it last year during the pandemic. He sold it for 4.4 million. So that's around a 3.5x increase in 8 years. Not bad.
Not bad.
Whilst I was in China during my time there, she got a phone call, and the real estate agent offered her 9 million renminbi.
Wow.
So it's approximately a 6 times increase over the last 8 years, but 100% during the pandemic.
Just during a year.
Just during.
Crazy.
It's because the entire area has
just booming.
exploded, where our factory workers nowadays, they are taking home pocket pay 5,000 renminbi per month.
Yeah.
That's $800 that they take home.
Yeah.
Tax free. They don't need to pay for rent. They don't need to pay for food. So this is 800 spending money, which you compare it to many countries around the world.
Yeah, it's a big disposable income, isn't it?
It's huge. And so because of that, the entire market
the economy is changing.
Where at that rate, I still can't hire enough workers.
Yeah.
I'm still 100 workers short in China right now, where you hear 1.4 billion people, but I still have labor shortages.
You're still trying to find that 100 skilled people that want to come and work for you. Yeah.
Exactly. And so pushing us heavily in towards automation.
Yeah.
We're in it's at a price point where actually automation makes complete sense because the salary has gone up so much and robotic costs has come down quite a bit.
Yeah.
So from an automation standpoint, robotics and software wise, COVID is pushing us towards that route. The whole push towards Industry 4.0 has moved it forward because we need to be able to remotely monitor our factories. And big shift towards that, we're seeing that right now.
Yeah, that whole digital transformation is huge, and like you say, the economics of automation are changing rapidly. What is really interesting is what you said about team, and you're absolutely right in that these crises really push teams, and you find out what they're really good at, and some of them you push really hard and they creak. But it seems your team have really got together and got behind it. And I've really enjoyed reading your columns in Forbes, where you've focused very much on the HR side of the business and the diversity in the team and just building that winning culture that you seem to have at the moment. That it feels that that's become something that you're really very passionate about, Carl.
Yes, definitely. I think the phrase is culture eats strategy for breakfast.
Yeah.
And certainly I think from by placing that emphasis on organization health, which is culture plus performance, it's really driven us forward. The key for us is trying to recruit more people, like-minded people like ourselves.
Yeah, and to spread that culture across your entire group, because you've got people in Malaysia and Mexico and the UK, and having that same culture across the whole team is going to be key to your success. Yeah, and actually that's going to be one of our future articles on Forbes, where we talk about how do you implement company culture in different regions, because that process is going to be a challenge. Yeah, and you've got to be respectful of those cultures. So when you look at this, everything that's happened in the last 12 months, seismic change for your business, but a seismic change for the industry, do you see EMS going back to the kind of same model as it was, or do you see it changing, maybe deeper partnerships, maybe more agile models, more resilience, more just in case, less just in time? What do you see as the fundamentals that are going to change in the industry? Well, certainly gone are the days where everyone just rushes to China as the solution for everything. But I'm not buying into the whole complete regionalization approach. I think from a supply chain standpoint, that just doesn't work. You might build ICs in North America, but if the PCB is still coming from China, your supply chain is still broken if you're not able to buy from China. So I think the proper approach for the EMS industry is definitely a very strong China plus one movement, where I think it makes sense to maintain manufacturing in China, where you do a portion of it in China and a portion of it
elsewhere.
Yeah.
Because you'll still be able to control your supply chain in that manner, but simultaneously as well too, you're not losing your presence in China, because like I was saying before, it's 1.4 billion people, many of whom have $800 per month of disposable income.
Yeah.
It's the world's largest market right now.
Yeah.
You have to sell into that. It's key, and to manufacture in China would be ideal to sell into the Chinese market. So China Plus One is very, very a big portion of it. I think from an EMS market standpoint as well, to the whole design capability, you have to be able to offer design for your customers, because it's not just about building part to print anymore. It's being able to do it consecutively. You have to manage the entire supply chain for them. And without the design capabilities, you can't. So there will be a battle for engineering expertise. Whoever has the best engineers will excel in this new market for EMS.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. I think it's that idea of upskilling the EMS and becoming that key manufacturing and supply chain partner to your customers, not just a factory where they can build stuff cheaply. And as you said, the China Plus One, and if people are coming to the Season Group, they've got China Plus 1, 2, 3, whatever they need. So I think having that right global footprint, and not thinking you can just shift out of China, because as you say, what a fantastic market. And as a result of the way your business is growing, you're actually creating more consumers for your customers. So you're building this really interesting virtuous circle. I think that's key. I think the last thing I'd just like to talk about with you is part of that is how we make that sustainable and how we create a sustainable future, because when you do go through these disruptions, you have a bit of a reset. So you have the opportunity to maybe do some of the things you were doing even better than you did before. And I know you guys have got a big focus on the environment, on sustainability throughout your facilities. Has that become an important part of your vision going forward?
Well, there's no point in building for the future if there's no future.
Yeah.
And so for us, we're a caring company. We want to take care of our employees, but also we have to give back to society and take care of it for the next generation. So from an ISO 14001 standpoint, that's a baseline. You have to be at that level. All right. But then also on top of that as well, to steering it back to from a design standpoint, we have to design for recycling. We have to push our customers to also think about sustainability as well. And I think right now, from the benefit that you're seeing from this commodity price increase has been the fact that it's more economical to think of recycling, just because it makes more sense. Previously, recycled material was more expensive and more taboo, but now with the economics supporting it, there's more shifts towards using more sustainable methods for manufacturing, packaging, and products alike too. Yeah. So I think Adam Smith called it correctly. The invisible hand does work. It just takes time for it to work itself out.
Yeah, no, and I think it's fascinating to see that you've got that as an important lens to view packaging through, to view supply chain through, to view design through, and it adds another dimension that makes what you do even more valuable to the OEM. So I think that's really essential. Carl, fantastic to talk to you again. Glad to hear things are certainly moving in the right direction in terms of demand. Continued work on that supply side to keep everything in balance, which I think is the big challenge now. But in the meantime, thanks so much for your time and thanks for talking to me today.
Thank you, Phil.